You're still watching See Today Business. The Indonesia Stock Exchange has a number of listed companies that can be categorized as environmentally friendly stocks and are summarized in the IDX ESG Leaders Index with a total market cap that is 39% of the IDX total. In the period between December 2023 and March 2024, there are 30 listed companies included in the IDX ESG Leaders with a total market cap exceeding 4,544 trillion rupiahs as of February the 2nd, 2024. Based on market cap growth from 2018 up until February 2024, there were 6 green stocks in the IDX ESG Leaders Index that managed to soar by hundreds of percents. Among them are PT Chandra Asri Petrochemical and PT Barito Pacific. Meanwhile, based on data from ESG rating agency Sustainalytics, PT Telkom Indonesia is the company with the highest ESG index rating in the telecommunications sectors in the Indonesian capital market. From the updated data in February 2024, Telkom achieved an ESG score of 27.1 points with an environmental score of 6.83, a social score of 12.6, and a governance score of 7.66 points. And to delve more into the topic, joining me today is Mentor Inc. founder Armandi Oesman. Hello, Mas. Armandi, thank you so much for coming to our studio.
Pleasure to be here. Thank you, Aline.
Yes, can you share your insights regarding the ESG and how important for companies to pay like special attention to allocate like resources to focus more on the ESG?
Sure. I think lately we've seen that ESG is becoming more of a scrutiny by not only investors but also banks or other private credit lenders to various companies. And this is primarily because I think there is an increased pressure from the society for investors and also lenders of funds to add one more lens into the evaluation that they do to companies, which is an ESG lens, because they expect these companies, as many other businesses, to operate in a more environmentally sustainable ways and also act in more socially responsible manners.
So in your opinion, we have delivered information about the listed companies that are considered ESG, with ESG proficient. So in the future, where do you think the trend will go? Whether it will be only a gimmick for the capital market in Indonesia, or do you see that there's an increasing urge for the companies because of the benefits or maybe the incentives that they will receive if they put more importance on ESG?
Sure. Yeah, I think it's inevitable that this market of ESG-themed investments or even debt are growing in Indonesia and also in the region. As we can see in 2023, I think OJK, or the Financial Services Authority, released a figure of something close to $900 million or equivalent to roughly almost 14 trillion Indonesian rupiah being issued in the form of sustainability-focused debt instruments. And we've seen some of the state-owned enterprises also capitalizing on the momentum of ESG investing or ESG themed transactions. So I think we're still in the early stages here in Indonesia, but if we look at the region and also globally, I think it's a market that eventually the Indonesian companies will have to adapt into.
So how attractive actually are Indonesian companies in the eyes of like big investors, like global investors, to invest in the ESG companies in Indonesia?
Yeah, I think Indonesia is in a bit of a tricky position because if we look at the country in the region, we are the biggest economy. We are the country with the largest population. But at the same time, we are quite heavily reliant on the sectors such as agricultural products or commodities, which are prone to all sorts of ESG scrutiny. So I think those companies that are able to communicate to the stakeholders and also demonstrate that they are in fact adopting ESG to a higher standards, these are the ones who would be able to succeed in fundraising activities, be it equity or debt. And this has been evidenced last year, where we saw a number of state-owned enterprises, say for example like Pertamina Geothermal, they successfully issued a green bond which was oversubscribed by 8 times. So I think the market appetite is there for the right companies.
Okay, you mentioned that we are still in the early stages. In your opinion, what needs to be done by all the stakeholders to make this sustainable?
Sure, I think it's a combination of things, right? We do require a higher level of awareness and also education, and at the same time, incentives are required to obviously incentivize these businesses to be more ESG compliant. Say, if we look at the region, I would group two countries, where one group is for countries like Singapore or Thailand or Malaysia, where they are more integrated towards the global economy. You know, these countries have little choice but to adopt a higher ESG standard, say for example like Singapore, in order to remain as a financial services hub in the region. They are putting aside something like $25 million by the Monetary Authority of Singapore to develop sustainable finance specialists. Same story with Malaysia. They have a more more clarity in the carbon market trading. And also Thailand, half of their GDP is from exports to various countries. So their private sector are more embracing towards ESG initiatives. And then you have the second group of countries which are less integrated into the global economy, like Indonesia, where a large chunk of our GDP is mainly coming from domestic consumption. You know, so we see tangible steps are being taken by the government and also the industry players, but we need to accelerate the pace in order to keep up with the other nations, I think.
Accelerating the pace, what are the challenges in Indonesia, especially faced by the companies to adopt the high standards of ESG, in your opinion?
Yeah, I think we need some sort of stimulants for ESG-related activities to really pick up pace. Say, for example, it could be stimulus for companies that are engaged in certain ESG activities, or even reach a certain level of ESG parameters or metrics, right? We've seen some examples in this space, like how the government are encouraging banks and top-tier state-owned enterprises to publish what they call the annual sustainability reports. Yeah. And if this could be made mandatory for some of the other companies that are in the private sector, this could perhaps act as a stimulus for companies to react in a similar way. And we've seen how some positive impacts of these stimulus take place, like I mentioned Pertamina's green bond issued last year. We saw Cement Indonesia as well issued a sustainability-linked loan last year. And the banks, Bank Mandiri, BRI, they are very active in issuing debt instruments that are sustainability-linked.
So how can the state-owned enterprises in Indonesia can become the driver for the ESG implementation in Indonesia?
Sure. I think number one, I see that many of the state-owned enterprises are already incorporating the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, or the UN SDGs, into their goals and strategies, and that's a great start.
Yes.
And I think, secondly, what they can perhaps do is perhaps educate the ecosystem of their value chains or their supply chains to ensure that their suppliers or their buyers are similarly adopting the same level of ESG standards. So this could help stimulate the overall value chain to become more environmentally friendly, more socially responsible. So perhaps the large state-owned enterprises especially, they can continue doing what they're already doing and also spread that in their ecosystem value chain.
So we see strong appetite from the global investors and also like mindfulness to invest in companies that are ESG oriented, right? But as for the investors in Indonesia, the retail investors, where do you see that? Do you think that they will have this kind of appetite like our domestic investors? Because like from my personal experience, I invest in fund, right, based on like ESG companies index like that, and I think the performance is quite good, like outperforming the benchmark. So yeah, I want to know, like from your perspective, the appetite for the domestic investors for products like this.
Sure. Thanks, Aline. I think, if we talk about investing, we want to look at how much of economic value can be created from such activities, right? And I think adding an ESG lens to investing does not necessarily mean that you may get the best returns, but it enables you to think about whether investing in these companies or in these instruments are in line with your personal values, for example, right? And for the companies that are adopting higher ESG standards, it's not solely just about the brand reputation or the customer loyalty or the investor preference, but it's also about opening up themselves to new markets, right? Like companies I mentioned earlier that are exporting into countries in the European Union or in North America, without a high level of ESG standards, they would not be able to access these markets or these countries. Now, with that level of ESG awareness and also implementation, not only will they be able to, according to your view, win the hearts of the investors, but also access new markets which will eventually or ultimately lead to higher revenue.
Wow, thank you so much for sharing your insights. Armandi Oesman, co-founder of Mentor Inc. Thank you once again for coming to our studio.
Pleasure to be here.
Yes, so we're going for a break. When we return, our daily recap from stock market you don't want to miss, of course. Okay, we'll be right back.